Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our nation has to offer, especially healthcare. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Today we're actually broadcasting from the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. Within the last 18 months, government documents have been declassified that prove that the Central Intelligence Agency was well aware of the Watergate break-in before it happened, and that they infiltrated the Watergate burglar team. 4 of the 8 Watergate burglars were actively working for the Central Intelligence Agency. Senator Howard Baker, who was the ranking Republican on the Senate Watergate Committee, was well aware of the CIA's involvement of the takedown of Richard Nixon, but he was specifically prohibited by Senate Watergate Committee Chairman Sam Ervin from including that in his minority report. Nick Ackerman, you may have seen this guy on MSNBC, he tries to pretend like he's some kind of law enforcement official or prosecutor. In fact, he's a rabid left-wing prosecutor. Actually quoted as saying, "We know that Nixon knew in advance about the Watergate break-in. We could just never prove it." No, Nick, you didn't know anything of the kind. But it's interesting as the truth about Watergate becomes clearer and more obvious that Richard Nixon was taken down just as JFK was, just as they tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan, just as they tried to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, bankrupt him, put him in jail, and ultimately tried at least twice, now maybe even 3 times, considering last weekend, to assassinate him. This, to me, proves the existence of a deep state. President Dwight Eisenhower warned us about this. He called it the military-industrial complex, but in his farewell address to the American people, he warned us about the accumulation of power by unelected bureaucrats and others who have, in fact, since 1963, I think, affected America's government and the American position. In any event, it's glad to see the truth is finally coming out. For anybody who was paying attention, you may have noticed last week that as a condition of his presidential pardon, President Richard Nixon was required to give 6 hours of sworn testimony before a grand jury on various topics. But one section of that testimony was, until days ago, classified and sealed. We now know that the deep state, specifically the Joint Chiefs, had an active spying operation in the Nixon White House, and that Nixon and his Secretary of State, or initially his National Security Advisor, Henry Kissinger, were being spied on by the Defense Department. That there was a naval yeoman named Radford who was photographing documents, rifling through file drawers, desks, even went through Henry Kissinger's briefcase to spy on Nixon. Why? Very simple. Because the deep state was opposed to ending the war in Vietnam. It was, after all, extraordinarily profitable for the defense contractors. They were opposed to a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets, which Nixon was able to negotiate. And of course, they were opposed to opening the door to China. Now, critics of Nixon blame Nixon for the fact that China is today a danger to the United States, not recognizing that when Richard Nixon opened the door to China, it was a backwards, dirt-poor agrarian society where few people had indoor plumbing and where the rural areas didn't even have electricity. No, it was Bill Clinton who gave most favored nation trading status to the Chinese 30 years later that would make them the great economic and military danger that they are today. Meanwhile, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sat for a closed-door deposition before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee that was actually held virally from her home in Westchester County, New York. In a statement posted to social media before her testimony, Clinton lashed out at Republicans, accusing them of targeting her instead of Donald Trump over alleged connections to disgraced financier Jeff Epstein and his pimp associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. We have no links to Epstein, said Hillary Clinton, whose husband was on Epstein's plane 27 times and who visited Epstein's island at least 3 times. Although based on the sworn testimony of several of the victims of Epstein who refused multi-million-dollar payments and moved forward with litigation, Bill Clinton was most definitely on the island. Also clear is the fact that Jeffrey Epstein provided the seed capital for the Clinton Foundation and for the Clinton Global Initiative, as well as making campaign contributions to Hillary's campaign for the U.S. Senate, as well as the New York State Democrat Party. No links, you say? Wrong. Hillary Clinton insisted she possessed no knowledge that she could aid investigators and framed the hearings as a political distraction. Hillary declined, however, to defend her husband, Bill Clinton. He's actually scheduled to testify tomorrow. Flight logs and photographs tied to the Epstein investigation show the former president traveling, as I say, as many as 27 times on Epstein's private jet to multiple international destinations. And of course, Ghislaine Maxwell, who Hillary claims to barely know, was a guest of honor at Chelsea Clinton's wedding, a wedding paid for by the Clinton Global Initiative, not by Bill and Hillary. Hillary Clinton's combative opening remarks suggest she plans to turn the inquiry into a partisan fight. That's fine with me. This should be no surprise. Democrats have attempted to make the Epstein scandal all about Donald Trump, even though the emails have proven that Epstein hated Trump and the two men had a falling out decades ago, long before Epstein was even accused and convicted of sex with a child. The evidence shows that Epstein had intense contact overwhelmingly with Democrats, with the exception of one drunken, bloated, fake right-winger named Steve Bannon. Bannon was reached out to by Epstein when he was on the White House staff, but didn't reach out to Epstein until after he was fired. Now, the emails released by the Department of Justice show that Steve Bannon was coaching Epstein on the rehabilitation of his image and was constantly denigrating Donald Trump, calling him stupid, undermining Trump's China trade policy, and insisting that he, Bannon, was the center of the MAGA movement, not Donald Trump. There'll be a lot more coming out about Steve Bannon and who financed his career and his podcast. That's coming up very, very soon. Stay tuned to the Stone Zone. We'll have a lot more about that in the days and weeks again. But Democrats keep insisting they want more disclosure about Epstein. I agree. I want all of the files to be released because what it will show you is those who visited the island, like former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell of Michigan, former Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers of the Clinton administration, all Democrats. Meanwhile, speaking at a private town hall inside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, billionaire Bill Gates admitted it was, in his words, a huge mistake to associate with the pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, years after Epstein had already pled guilty to having illicit sexual relations with minors. Gates insisted he never visited Epstein's island and never interacted with victims, but acknowledged multiple meetings, international travel together, and even bringing foundation officials into contact with Jeffrey Epstein while seeking philanthropic funding. Gates was recently forced to withdraw from a major global AI conference in India after public outrage built over his deep association with Epstein. During the meeting, Gates conceded his then-wife had warned him about Epstein early on, but Gates had continued his personal relationships with Epstein through 2014. We also now know from the emails reduced by the Department of Justice that Gates sought help from Epstein to get antibiotics to treat him for sexually transmitted diseases that he got from Russian prostitutes who had been set up with Bill Gates by Jeffrey Epstein himself. So this begs the question, why would one of the world's richest men need fundraising help from a convicted sex offender? Seems like Gates had all the world's richest and influential people on speed dial. He didn't need help making these connections. He was a globalist power broker. So what would he need Jeffrey Epstein for? What would Epstein specialize in that would spur their friendship? These are the questions that, in my opinion, must be asked. Notion that the friendship between Gates and Epstein was innocuous is patently absurd. Gates believes that he should dictate global public policy, particularly medical policy, and force his toxic vaccination cocktail onto the bodies of children. This man is at core a violator and a pervert. If any deserves to be a victor of cancel culture, I suggest to you that it's Bill Gates. Meanwhile, peace talks continue between the United States and Iran. U.S. envoys Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff met for more than 3 hours with the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, on Thursday, with mediations by Oman's top diplomat, Badr al-Bousaid. The reports from Kushner and Witkoff will shape whether President Trump pursues a permanent agreement or whether he considers direct military action to stop Tehran's nuclear ambitions. Administration officials say the goal is clear. No repeat of the Obama-era Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which gave Iran sanctions relief along with pallets of cash while allowing nuclear restrictions to expire over time. American negotiators are demanding Iran dismantle major enrichment facilities in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, and surrender enriched uranium stockpiles. The International Atomic Energy Agency, headed by Rafael Grossi, participated in the ongoing negotiations. Supporters of tougher stances say it reflects a lesson learned. Temporary deals simply buy time for hostile regimes, in this case Iran, but it would buy time for them to develop nuclear weapons. This cannot be tolerated. The administration insists any agreement must be permanent and verifiable. Iran has submitted a draft proposal, but details remain undisclosed. It's clear that the Trump administration will not waver from its peace through strength philosophy, backed by critical consequences for an Iranian threat that cannot be trusted. Iran should make a deal now while one is still available. Otherwise, the Ayatollah may get Maduro'd, and he will never even see it coming. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. I'm Roger Stone. We'll be back with more hot politics on the other side, so please don't go away. Once again, we're here 5 days a week talking politics, news, history, style. Once in a while, we even talk about food. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And you're diving head first into the deep end of the Stone Zone. And I'm your host, Roger Stone. After the U.S. men's Olympic hockey team captured gold and accepted an invitation from Donald Trump to attend the State of the Union, fake news propagandists at the New York Times shamefully attacked the presidents for celebrating with their own president. The Times columnist Jerry Brewer, not a journalist, a propagandist, argued the victory stopped being unifying once the team embraced the White House invitations, suggesting the athletes lacked political instinct and allowing their triumph to become political capital for President Trump. Does Brewer not understand that Donald Trump is the president of the United States and that in that capacity, he represents the country, and the fact that every American is proud of the U.S. Olympic team? In other words, they committed the offense of showing respect to the office of the presidency and pride in the American flag. I'm surprised the Olympic heroes weren't accused of being white supremacists by the New York Times. The New York Times was a once great newspaper, but today it's just a propaganda front for the Democrat Party. And of course, they are very badly obsessed with Trump derangement syndrome. Criticism of the Olympic hockey heroes, who are revered by the vast majority of Americans, reveals more about the commentators than the champions themselves. The players praised the troops, honored their country, and enthusiastically accepted a congratulatory call from the commander-in-chief. That used to be normal in America. Championship teams have visited presidents of both parties for decades, as it should be. The Olympics are meant to be beyond politics, yet today, patriotism itself is treated as suspect, and only when conservatives are involved. That's the weird part. The team didn't divide the country, they united it. They won for the United States, proudly wore the stars and stripes, and celebrated with millions of cheering Americans. This was just the moment the country needed, but it's not what the American left wanted. They hope to keep Americans divided in each other's throats because they believe that's their best way of getting power back. They hope the Olympians would spit on their country, but instead, these young athletes were grateful for the opportunity, proud of their nation, and respectful of American traditions. So I say God bless the Olympic hockey team for refusing to play into the media-driven divide and instead unifying Americans around our shared patriotic heritage. I stayed up very late to watch the President's State of the Union address, which I think was a triumph. Yes, America is back because we have a president who is leading us back to greatness again. Watching the media commentary about the president's no longer being entertaining doesn't recognize where America is. Let's be clear. Inflation is down. Unemployment is down. Mortgage rates are down. Gas prices are down. Grocery prices are down. And, well, peace is broken out in at least 8 wars that this president has solved. America is back. And the American left hates it. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Don't go away because we'll be.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I'm Roger Stone, and you're back in the Stone Zone. A major legal victory for immigration enforcement occurred this week as a federal appeals court ruled that the IRS can lawfully cooperate with immigration authorities to help identify criminal illegal immigrants. The United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit unanimously upheld an agreement allowing the IRS to share limited taxpayer address information with the Department of Homeland Security and Immigrations and Custom Enforcement for criminal investigations and deportation efforts. The ruling rejected a lawsuit from a activist group attempting to block cooperation between federal agencies. Judges, even in D.C., found the plaintiffs were unlikely to win because federal law already permits disclosure when investigators make a valid criminal request. The court confirmed the government can use lawful tools to find people who broke immigration laws. The policy stems from a 2025 Memorandum of Understanding that allows ICE to request addresses connected to criminal investigations. Officials say the information helps remove dangerous offenders, prevent public benefit fraud, and ensure voter rolls remain accurate and clean. Critics argue that tax law forbids sharing addresses alone, but the court said that the statute clearly allows disclosure to specific officials for non-tax criminal investigations, which is exactly what's happening here. The judges emphasized that the IRS will only comply when requests meet strict legal standards. For years, Americans have been told enforcement was impossible. This decision, however, says otherwise. Agencies can cooperate, follow the law, and protect communities at the same time. If someone commits crimes and hides them from bureaucracy, the government should still be able to find them. There should be no endless procedural headaches stopping illegals from being deported. The ruling marks another step towards restoring immigration enforcement and making sure the Trump administration has all the tools available to get these dangerous invaders out of the country. Not shocking, we learned that the Biden FBI actually spied on Patel, as well as presidential campaign manager and now White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles during the Biden administration before the election. FBI Director Patel has revealed that investigators working under Special Counsel Jack Smith obtained phone metadata tied both to Patel himself and to Trump's advisor, now Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, while they were private citizens. The records reportedly included call logs, so-called toll records, and even a recorded call between Wiles and her attorney. Patel said the most troubling detail wasn't the surveillance, but what happened afterwards. According to the FBI director, the files were placed in a restricted FBI database category labeled prohibited, making them difficult for oversight officials to ever locate. After discovering the materials upon becoming director, Patel eliminated the classification system and removed personnel who were involved in the politically motivated surveillance scheme. The deep state claims that obtaining metadata is legal and routine in complex probes and that no call context was collected. But that, of course, is hogwash. Targeting close associates of a political candidate and then burying the records that you did so crosses a line from legitimate investigation into abuse of power. The controversy follows earlier disputes over the Mar-a-Lago search and the ultimately dismissed federal cases against President Trump after his election victory. This is part of a broader effort by federal authorities to monitor political opponents rather than focus solely on criminal conduct. Thank God that FBI Director Patel has ended this culture, and the FBI is back to investigating real threats. Special Counsel Jack Smith and others who perpetrated these abuses cannot be left off with a slap on the wrist. I think they should be made into examples with severe consequences coming against them so this behavior will never happen again. After all, didn't they remove Richard Nixon as president because he allegedly was spying on his political opponents? That's what the Russian collusion hoax was all about. Meanwhile, a new artificial intelligence platform is raising alarms about the future of American education and the future of personal responsibility. The entity, which is called Compani AI, is promoting a so-called homework agent called Einstein, a virtual assistant modeled after Albert Einstein that can complete assignments on behalf of students and even submit them automatically. According to the company, the AI can log into school systems like Canvas, watch lectures, read course material, write essays with citations, respond to classmates, and turn in homework, all without the student either lifting a finger or even knowing about it. The platform boasts the tool works across subjects like math and science to literature and history. Basically, the robot goes to school so the child doesn't have to. But how then does the child learn? The timing of this AI program couldn't be worse. You see, recent data reported by the Associated Press shows that childhood literacy in the United States is literally collapsing. Just over 30% of fourth graders read at proficiency levels, down sharply since 2019. Yet the company's founder dismissed criticism, arguing that education should adapt to AI just as it adapted to calculators and the internet. But critics, I think, are right when they say this isn't a calculator. It's academic outsourcing. So instead of helping students learn, it risks training an entire generation to depend on machines to do the thinking itself. Parents should worry that schools have abandoned the fundamentals in terms of trends and technology. Now students may never need to pick up a book, write an essay, or understand the lesson at all. Technology is dumbing us down at a rapid rate, and this new AI platform will only worsen this trend. It should be banned before it destroys the foundations of school in this country. I say it's time to return to reading, writing, and arithmetic. Meanwhile, according to a new poll conducted on behalf of the 1776 Law Center, 60% of voters say that vaccination manufacturers should lose their legal immunity in injury cases, including 1/3 who strongly support ending it outright. Support across age, race, and gender lines, while only about 27% oppose removing the protection. The legal shield comes from the National Childhood Vaccination Injury Act, which placed most claims into a government compensation system instead of traditional courts. But don't look for it online because, well, you won't find it. Today, taxpayers effectively defend those cases, and payouts come from a federally managed fund financed by vaccination taxes. The system limits damages, restricts evidence discovery, and leaves many families waiting for years for review. By design, of course, in order to protect Big Pharma. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky recently introduced legislation to change that, saying Americans are forced into a process that denies real accountability. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a good friend of mine, has also proposed expanding compensation eligibility, including conditions linked to neurological symptoms. This usually cuts to the core of equal justice. In America, no corporation should be above the law. The people deserve a day in court against Big Pharma. Vaccination injuries have been covered up, and families who have seen their children hurt or killed, including the development of autism, of course, have been demonized by a corrupt medical establishment. This must end now. Ban these ridiculous vaccination courts and force Big Pharma to pay out for the damages that their products have caused. Even though the public doesn't support the vaccination regime, Democrats will not make it easy to have it be repealed. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, I call him Little Josh Shapiro, announced that he's suing the Trump administration after sweeping changes to federal childhood vaccination guidance issued by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The lawsuit, joined by 15 Democrat-led states, targets HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy for replacing all 17 members of a federal advisory panel that shapes national vaccination recommendations. Shapiro, who would like to run for president, accused the administration of disregarding quote-unquote silence. Here we go again, and vowed to follow guidance from outside medical groups instead. But the administration states correctly that the overhaul does the opposite, restoring public trust after years of these one-size-fits-all mandates. Following a presidential directive, federal health officials compared U.S. childhood vaccination schedules to other developed countries. The review found that America recommends protection against more diseases, administers more of a number of total doses than other peer nations, yet still fails to achieve higher vaccination rates. As a result, the CDC no longer universally recommends several shots, including certain flu, COVID-19, hepatitis, meningococcal, and RSV vaccinations. Officials say the goal is transparency and informed consent, allowing families, not Washington, D.C. bureaucrats, who are often paid by Big Pharma, to weigh risks and benefits with their doctors. The lawsuit highlights the growing divide: government authority versus parental autonomy. Families should not be coerced into taking these shots, which we have seen are often unnecessary and in some cases even dangerous, more dangerous than the diseases they're supposed to be protecting the public from. Governor Shapiro should be ashamed of himself for joining on this lawsuit, but that is little more than a political ploy for him to gain recognition heading into the 2028 presidential race. Perhaps he's hoping for financing from Big Pharma for that presidential campaign. I predict that he goes nowhere. Meanwhile, newly released documents show that several severely unethical and perhaps illegal levels of political coordination between the now dismissed Georgia prosecution of President Donald Trump and state and federal officials. Records obtained through an open records litigation show that Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis worked closely with officials tied to the Biden White House, the Department of Justice, and the Congressional January 6th Committee while building her election-related case against President Trump and a number of his allies. According to the communications, lawyers for President Joe Biden waived executive privilege protections, allowing, or requiring in this case, former Trump administration officials to testify before a state grand jury, an extraordinary step that blurred the lines between federal power and local prosecution. Federal prosecutors also facilitated interviews and shared congressional transcripts, while committee staff reportedly offered summaries of witness testimony and access to classified internal materials. The Georgia indictment, of course, ultimately collapsed. Courts removed Willis over misconduct concerns because of her own scandalous sexual dealings in the workplace, and the charges were dismissed after President Trump returned to the White House. A state appellate ruling cited an appearance of impropriety serious enough to disqualify her entire prosecutorial office. Conservatives argue the revelations confirmed long-held suspicions that there was a coordinated legal effort that was designed to damage a political opponent during an election cycle. This was, in effect, an election interference conspiracy waged by the deep state and the Democrat Party. If federal authorities helped a local prosecutor pursue a sitting president's challenger, it undermines public trust in equal justice under law. There's only one way to restore faith in the process, and that is to prosecute those who violated the law. The evidence is there. Now we must need and have the political will to proceed. Our current Attorney General must bring these nefarious actors to justice, or there'll be nothing stopping the bad guys from doing all of this again the first time they get a chance. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll have more politics for you on the other side, so whatever you do, please don't go.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And you're back in the Stone Zone, and I'm your host, Roger Stone. FBI Director Kash Patel has received a lot of criticism throughout his first year leading the FBI, particularly over his handling of the Epstein files. However, Patel's record as a whole has been actually quite impressive as he delivers on his mandate of restoring law and order. Internationally, of course, U.S. authorities captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro on outstanding drug-related charges alongside a major cartel seizures totaling more than 2,000 kilograms of fentanyl. The Bureau also reports multiple fugitives from its 10 most wanted list arrested, thousands of criminal suspects taken into custody, and a large number of missing children recovered through their anti-trafficking operations. This is a huge contrast from the previous administration's politicization of federal policing as they weaponize the deep state, spending all of their energy and efforts to go after President Trump, his allies, and his supporters. Investigations were tied to protests and political payback rather than focusing on violent offenders. As a result, pedophiles, murderers, and illegal aliens were able to run roughshod over the country. The shift under Patel's control is to prioritize national security, fight drug trafficking, and crimes against children first. And the numbers do not lie. Kash Patel's leadership is working. Of course, we need to see many deep state criminals brought to justice, which hasn't happened yet. But Patel is off to a good start in keeping the streets safe. The foundation of the FBI has been shored up under Patel's strong leadership. And I was pleased to see that he's going to close the J. Edgar Hoover FBI office in Washington, D.C., which will save millions of dollars. The foundation is, I think, very strong. The FBI is back to their core mission. Now is the time, however, to begin to see progress in the Russiagate investigation and prosecutions. See, I believe that there was a seditious conspiracy that began in a White House office in 2016, morphed into the Russian collusion hoax, two completely bogus impeachment trials against President Donald Trump. Then, of course, there was the theft of the 2020 election, which I think more and more evidence will become public here shortly. Then, of course, the January 6th Fed surrection, followed by the raid on a sitting president's home in Florida, and, of course, Arctic frost. That was an extra constitutional effort to frame the President of the United States, to keep him off the ballot, to impoverish him, and, well, to put him in prison. Now is the time for all of these crimes under a Florida grand jury to be exposed and for people to be held accountable. The far left says it's about revenge and retaliation, but I say it's about accountability and justice. And for that, I continue to pray. I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.